Project, Sean Ellis.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. My name is Sean Ellis. I am from Boston, Massachusetts. I spent 22 years in prison for a crime that I did not commit. Some of the factors that went into my wrongful conviction were misidentification, bad forensic science, government's misconduct, and incentivized testimony. Since my release, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to serve on the board of the New England Innocence Project. I'm also involved with other community engagements centered around prison reform and social justice work. And with that, I'll pass it on to my sister panelist, Heidi.
My name is Heidi Goodwin. I served 8.5 years of a 10-year sentence in Washington State. Ultimately, what led to my conviction was bad science, and the Washington State Innocence Project, along with pro bono attorneys, helped to assist to overturn my conviction in our state courts. I am now involved in several communities, like my brother Sean, that have to do with criminal justice reform, and namely one organization named Healing Justice. I serve on their advisory board, developing handbooks and resources for those who have been harmed by wrongful conviction, including original crime survivors who have been left behind by the criminal justice system as much as the rest of us. I'll turn it over to Darryl.
Hello, it's an honor and privilege to be here to talk to you all. My name is Darryl Siegers. At the age of 20 years old, I was arrested in Detroit, which is where I'm from, and for first-degree murder. I was subsequently convicted and sentenced to mandatory life. I did 34 years for a crime I did not commit. My conviction was based on incentivized testimony by witnesses who were cut deals to testify against me in exchange for lighter sentences themselves, which was subsequently proven to be absolutely false. My conviction was based largely on faulty forensics. We found out that the so-called Detroit police officer who testified in my case was not an expert at all, as he claimed during his trial testimony. He submitted false testimony about the ballistics that connected me to the murder weapon. We also found out it was ballistic testing and forensic science. We found out that his testimony was completely false. And I was released through the Wayne County conviction in July 9th. Later day, I was convicted. So, and since being released, I created a company called Access Plus, where we assist individuals in prison and in the community getting their police files, prosecutors' files, court records, transcripts. I've written a book since I've been out. I've been to every major university in the state of Michigan, giving speeches, working with young people, talking to faculty. I've been back inside the prisons, working with the prison administrators to create prison reform, and just doing everything I can to assist in criminal justice reform, prison reform, and everything else I've done. I've been to community centers, poverty centers, speaking to people, helping in any way I can, making donations, and I'm just here today to help and participate in this great conversation.
Thank you. I think we may have a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm so glad that we can still hear you, Darryl. I'm going to start, with a little background, which is that, wrongfully convicted people have a unique perspective on the failures of the criminal legal system. It goes from systemic racism to police brutality to the violence of the state, through wrongful prosecutions and even mass incarceration. So I want to talk to all of you from your experience being wrongfully convicted. What can you say about the failures of the criminal legal system? And I want to start. With Sean on this as well.
Thank you for the question. the failures of the criminal legal system, to me, it goes back and it has some starting points in the 13th Amendment. But before I get to the 13th Amendment, I wanna qualify all that I say with this, that it's my position that the exoneree community is second to none in really being able to relate to the plight of the African slave that was brought over to the shores of this country. And I say that now to go into the 13th Amendment, because the people that were brought to this country did nothing wrong to experience all that they experienced once they got here. Just like the exoneree did nothing wrong to experience what the exoneree experienced in being brought into the criminal legal system. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude, except for one who is duly convicted of a crime. And no exoneree, can it be said, was duly convicted of a crime. And therefore, what the failure of the system did to all of us as a community, doesn't matter if you're Black, brown, or white, is that it took us as individuals and relegated and put us back into a condition of slavery by virtue of its own law. And so the failures of the system that I was a victim, now a survivor of, and the failures of the system that Heidi and Darryl were a victim and now survivor of, is the same failures that my ancestors were victims of, and our survivors now through myself and those who are pushing back against the systemic and institutional expressions of racism within this country.
Thank you, Sean. I want to ask Heidi or Darryl if you want to chime in on that.
Sure. Yeah, I would actually like to say, that unique experience that you had mentioned. Obviously, I am a white woman, and so it might be kind of strange that I'm sitting in on this conversation. However, I think all of us as exonerees can relate to one question: why did this happen to me? We ask that over and over again when we're incarcerated. So as I was asking myself this question, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? It took me on a journey of really understanding the criminal justice system and how we have gotten to where we are today. And you cannot acknowledge that without seeing the systemic racism that it has been built on. We talk about reforming it, but until we can understand that it was actually designed and built to oppress minority communities, disproportionately Black communities, going back to the 13th Amendment, like Sean said, then how can we truly reform it? I know that there is a conversation in our exoneree community where they bring up, well, this is a class issue. This is not a race issue. Absolutely, you are correct. But historically, Black communities and minority communities have been disproportionately living in poverty. Poverty makes it the class issue, correct? So the attention that we need to bring to that is that they go hand in hand. The other thing that I want to, bring to light right now is that this is just a conversation. I know that there's members in our exoneree community that are concerned that this topic, particularly when it concerns Black Lives Matter, could potentially divide us. We don't feel that that has to happen. We do not feel that this is anything but a conversation. We're not merging with Black Lives Matter. We're just going to let the awareness that they have brought to the country highlight the issues that we have that are similar to what they are trying we're all trying to fight for criminal justice reform. We're all trying to expose police brutality and the constitutional rights that have not been being given to all of us, disproportionately those in the Black community. And so as a white woman and searching for my answer as to why this happened to me, I became aware, and I realized that this started with the oppression of Black people. And until we can address that as a community, as a whole, and maybe even as a larger organization, we aren't going to reach the reform that we need to actually correct this. It's going to end with the end of systemic racism. And I'll pass it to Darryl.
When we think about, the Black Lives Matter movement, one of the things that I'm truly grateful for is that they have brought in not only national attention to some of these issues, but international attention. Now, these issues have existed long before the Black Lives Matter movement, and we've all experienced them in one way or another. I think because of cell phones and now that you can record a lot of what is going on, it has come to the forefront. And with the assistance and some of the protests and marches that Black Lives Matters have inspired, it has brought awareness and recognition of police brutality and a lot of the issues that surround that we're suffering right now today. And so I'm grateful to Black Lives Matter for some of the things that they're doing. And it was a sustained campaign. Now, none of us, I'm sure, endorses any type of violence or looting or anything like that, but peaceful protest is grounded in our Constitution. And so when I see young people out there, old people out there, white people out there, Black people out there uniting for a common purpose to bring awareness of particular issues such as police brutality, it truly warms my heart and gives me hope to keep going forward. And so, in these issues, when you talk about how they affect us versus, or should I say, so-called Black people more than they do other people, then certainly you have to look at that, particularly when you consider that we're only 13% of the population as a whole, and yet we have a far greater participation, or should I say, incarceration rate than other races. And so you've heard the term the prison from preschool to the prison pipeline. I mean, when you hear things like that, it has to shock you. It has to, and so my mind, I not only want to focus on what the problems are, I want to focus on some of the potential solutions to these problems. When we look at what, the national attention that's been given to now police brutality, we want to blame the police for everything. And I don't share that belief. I don't share defunding the police. I do share the thought that maybe funds should be reallocated to assist police. You should give maybe folks with some type of psychological training in de-escalation. You should provide money for those type of things. You should provide money for training and dealing with domestic situations, domestic disturbances, as opposed to they just automatically pull out their gun and start shooting. We've heard too many stories about this. And then when you look at police, I think police should be randomly drug tested, like most people are on the job, on their jobs. And so I don't want to take a lot of time talking about just the police, but there's overall other problems in our system. We're talking about judges, prosecutors, jail administrators. All of these things work hand in hand, but I think the starting point begins with the police, because an individual's first introduction into the criminal justice system begins with the police. And so these things have to be addressed. And as I look at what Black Lives Matter, what they have brought to the table, legislation is being considered now as a result of some of the things that was inspired by them. You have politicians and governors and community leaders doing things in the name of criminal justice reform, police reform, And so at least, if nothing else, they brought these issues to the table where we're now discussing them. And it's through discussing and identifying some of these problems that we can solve these problems and come up with real solutions. And I think, when we're talking about police and prosecutors' offices, I think there should be review boards in police departments where there are civilians, because when there are shootings and things like this, you cannot have superiors of police officers deciding their own or determining whether a shooting was good or bad, or investigating themselves. You need independent forces to investigate these things, civilian review boards. So you might ask, well, what could this will just cost more money? You got people that will volunteer to do these things. And I can tell you where you can get these people from colleges and universities. They have brilliant professors. These people got empirical evidence. They did the research. They got the data. They got the stats, and they know they got real reform. They got real solutions. And so we need to tap into our colleges and universities for answers to a lot of these problems. It ain't just about the problem. We got to work through the solutions. And so this is why I think a lot of our solutions can come from is our college, universities, and some of our academics who solve some of these problems and bring about real reform, and not just talk about this stuff, but come up with solutions for these things. We can stop seeing people being killed and shot and murdered and all unlawfully imprisoned and wrongfully imprisoned.
Thank you.
And so if I could, I just wanted to bring a little context around the issue of class and race, because as we look out into the world, we see that there are people of all races and of all classes that are standing in support of the Black Lives Matter issues and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I just want to be clear on this. I do not support violence. I'm against violence. The Black Lives Matter movement, as I know and understand it based on my own individual research, is a non-violent movement. And so we can't really blame that particular movement for the violence that is happening as a result of their addressing the systemic and institutional racism that happens. But with that being said, there was a period in time during the course of this country that Black and Brown people were not even considered a class. They was considered property. And so when we say that the issues that are going on within society, within the exonerated community, is a class issue, I agree with that on one hand. That with my counterpart, with my white counterpart, for my white counterpart, it's a class issue, because I believe that if there was of the 1%, if there was of the wealthy, the chances of what happened to them being convicted of a crime they did not commit severely reduces. But for the Black person, I don't believe that changes in that point, because throughout the history of this country, the mere color of our skin has really been what has criminalized us in the eyes of the criminal legal system. Let's not forget that at some point during the history of our country, slavery was considered legal. And it was considered legal because I didn't look like those who were enslaving me. And so I just wanted to bring some context around that, and maybe at some point in the future we can have a further conversation to that.
And if I could just add one more thing, going back to what Darryl was talking about with the Black Lives Matter movement in itself and the accomplishments that it has done. I think that in our wrongful conviction community, we need to acknowledge that they have surpassed what all of the organizations in the Innocence Network have been fighting for decades. The Black Lives Matter has accomplished it in such a small amount of time. So many of the things that the wrongful conviction movement has been fighting for. And so that is why we are having this conversation, and we want to continue this conversation, because as much as we we need to acknowledge that they have done more in a smaller period of time than wrongful conviction, and how does that fit, and how do we use that to further what we're trying to accomplish as well?
You know, I also want to say this here. I say that the problem is race has a great deal. Race is a great part of this, and this is the reason why. Some prosecutors, white judges, white police officers, they can't see a brother in me. They can't see a son in me. They can't see a father in me. They can't see an uncle in me. They can't see themselves in me because I don't reflect them. And that's why it's so easy for them to treat me different. That's why it's so easy for them to treat Black people differently, because they can't see themselves in it. And if you can't see yourself in me, then you can't relate to me as a human being. And that's why it's so easy for a judge to sentence me to 100 years and then go to lunch. That's why it's so easy for prosecutors to send people to the death, to the gas chamber, and then go to lunch like it's nothing, you know, because they can't see themselves in us. And so this is one of the reasons why constant sensitivity, bias training needs to be taught at every level. Judges, prosecutors, police officers need to be constantly trained in sensitivity and how to see themselves and other people, about bias training. All of these things need to be continued to be highlighted in the criminal justice movement, because as I see, you know, and then the criminal justice system, all of us have filed, and this is something that people don't know probably, 99% of all appeals are denied. I've been to the United States Supreme Court 3 times. I filed 4 motions for new trial, 4 applications for leave to appeal, 5 habeas corpuses, denied. The system is not designed to grant appeals. 95 to 99% of all appeals are denied. And so we need to reconcile that. Why? Why are they denied? They're so marred down with procedural defaults, stuff that don't have anything to do with the Constitution. You file your appeal late one day, they essentially send you to the death chamber and kill you, and you had nothing to do with it. Your lawyer represented this stuff. He filed your appeal one day late. They can send you to the death chamber and kill you because your lawyer filed it late. And lawyers don't typically get punished. They get sanctioned, or maybe, you know, suspended for, you know, a week or so or a month or so, and that's it. But the defendants are the one who suffers real pain. And let me just say one other thing about policing. When I seen that officer sit on George Floyd's neck until he almost killed him, and he ultimately did, it's a mentality that he brought to the police department. I just don't think something that typically, and I'm not defending police department, but I'm simply saying, I don't think police departments trained him to do what he did. Probably provided him the platform, the opportunity. That type of sickness, he came to the department with that. And there's a lot of police officers who have that same mentality, that our lives don't really matter to them. And so they can have the audacity to do the things that they're doing, and it's now being revealed through video cameras. But this stuff has been going on for a long time, since the Civil War, since the passing of the 14th Amendment. And so we need to recognize that they need sensitivity training, they need constant training. So again, I don't think funding the police is the answer. I think reallocating funds, do different training for them, and then you can't send them to domestic situations without the proper personnel there to deal with domestic situations, unless they've been specifically trained in those areas.
Darryl, I wanted to, can you all see me? I wanted to, one of the points you made that I think is really significant and relates to a question we got actually from the audience, is that, you know, judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys and basically all the people in the system who have the power to take away people's freedoms that they don't see the humanity in the people who come before and don't have a connection to, don't have proximity to, don't have closeness to, don't feel that it is a part of them. And what about all of these folks who are listening and they themselves may not have a personal connection besides meeting all of you today to these tragedies and what really happens? How should they join a movement, this movement, to fight wrongful convictions if they don't have that personal connection? I would love to hear from all of you on that question.
A lot of times they can write to Innocence projects and do volunteer work. They can, there's prosecutors' offices who accept volunteers because a lot of them are understaffed, they are overworked and underfunded. You can volunteer with them. Now, this is somewhat a unique perspective here, and I've said this before. When I went into law schools, and some of the faculty and some of the students asked me, what can I do to help in this movement? Write a prisoner. That's what you can do. Write them. Find out what their perspectives is. And then they will tell you how you can help them. There's so many prisoners inside that their families have left them. They don't know what to do. They're alone. And the criminal justice system intimidates people. When you go in there, the eerie feeling, it intimidates all of us, even though I'm familiar with it now. As I said, I did 34 years for a crime I didn't commit, and I'm familiar with the law. I went inside. When I was inside, I studied the law, I ate the law, I breathed the law every day. I didn't play no games. I didn't play chess. I didn't play checkers. I made my room the war room because I knew that what they did to me was wrong, and I was not going to allow them to do this. So I studied the law and I learned it. But for the average person, when they go into a courtroom, they are intimidated because you hear them talk about statutes, court rules, procedures, stuff that you know nothing about. All you do is look into this lawyer help you. And a lot of times these lawyers are underpaid, overworked. They got 50 cases. They got to get this through. So they're trying to encourage you to plead guilty, particularly to sometimes a crime you didn't commit. And so, you know, what they can do is, first of all, write a prisoner. Sit down, go on the prison website and just randomly pick a name and just write them. And they will tell you how you can help them. Write some of these Innocence projects. Call your prosecutor's office and ask them, can you volunteer to do stuff? That's one of the ways that you can get involved. They will accept your involvement. Ask them to, you know, and then stay on them about creating these review boards, these civilian review boards, because that's what they need. They can't correct themselves and they need fresh ideas. Write these colleges and universities and ask them what they can, what can you do and how can you volunteer to help them? And it's endless on what you can do to get involved with this wrongful conviction movement.
So I'm actually going to use a commentary to answer this question. A woman had quoted Jesse Jackson and said, "America has a high tolerance for Black pain." So for me, and I think that this can apply to those who don't have any experience with wrongful conviction as well as those in our wrongful conviction community. Before you can even get to everything Darryl is saying, and I'm talking specifically to white people right now, you have to understand what the difference is between class and race, and you have to understand how systemic racism plays a part in the criminal justice system, which leads everywhere from mass incarceration to wrongful incarceration. And so with that being said, like, we have a privilege that Sean was talking about because we were not convicted on the color of our skin. That was not the basis of our convictions. And so in that sense, when we talk about class and how Black communities were disproportionately living in poverty and still are, and that is why they have a harder time in the courts getting the resources that they need to win a case when they are innocent. It's sad to say this, but this was happening for generations until white people became more affected. As the poverty level grew and more white families and white homes were falling into poverty levels, then white people were also getting, more so than they had been before, convicted of crimes that they had not committed. And that is what has brought us more attention. It's sad to say that, but it is true. And so we need to recognize that as in the white community, we need to recognize the privilege that we have, that these things did not happen to us on the basis of the color of our skin, and then doing all of the things that Darryl is saying to get involved with. But I don't believe until you can recognize that and sit with that uncomfortable feeling within yourself first, that you will truly be helpful to the wrongful conviction movement.
Yeah. You know, I start from the premise where, you know, I've heard it said before that Black people should get over slavery. That was centuries ago, so on and so forth. But coming forward, there were things that were systematically put in place to subjugate, to keep Black and brown people subjugated within this country, and in some ways just throughout the world. And those systems grew and gained an appetite that was no longer satisfiable, right? And then now, like my counterparts, like Heidi and Nad and Ray, who are white exonerees, have become victimized by a system that initially was focused on Black and brown people. And so one thing that you can do is to educate yourself about those systems. Understand what Black codes are and how they were used as a part of mass incarceration. Even way back then, mass incarceration isn't something that's new. Mass incarceration started way back when. Mass incarceration actually is an outgrowth from mass enslavement. But it's like, you know, educate yourself with Black codes, with redlining, with the things that are systematically put in place to keep Black people down. And then understand that there's been a criminalization of Black and brown people. And once you've done the kind of the fundamental work, you can also get involved with the innocent organizations in your part of the country, in your part of the world, no matter where they're at. You can get involved with the DA's office, but just get involved with the DA's office with a mindset that you're not going to be part of the status quo. You are going to be part of a dismantling of a white supremacist ideology within the DA's office. If that's not where you're going, if that's not just going in there for, then you're becoming part of the problem. If that's not why you would want to become part of law enforcement, to dismantle the white supremacist viewpoint and standpoint, then you're becoming part of the problem. You'll find yourself being one of the police officers that nailed on George Floyd's neck, because it's those establishments that the growth from them were in furtherance of white supremacy, in furtherance of the subjugation of Black and brown people. And so there has to be a complete change within the individual and the moral compass. We're at this point now within this country, because it is no longer socially acceptable from a moral standpoint of those who live within this country and throughout the world. And so that's what I would say, you know, for those who want to get involved, but get involved from the right mindset, from the right premise to bring about, you know, long-lasting solutions.
If I can add to just a couple things here. Someone put in the question box that something that I actually was going to say as well, which is going to court and actually watching what happens. If you watch what happens in court and TV, you don't see what really happens. You don't see the indignities at every single level of being in court. There is, I mean, you don't have to go many times to see how it's not working, how it's meant to, you know, throw people through an assembly line. So doing court watch, I mean, we should see that as part of our responsibility as people who are not charged with crimes, because people who are charged with crimes and who end up being incarcerated are doing, it's in our name, right? They say the people against, the Commonwealth against, it's in our name. And so we don't even know what they're doing until we go there. And then we become agents of, not only by learning about it, but obviously, as Sean said, you have to have the mindset to disrupt, right? It's not for the purpose of becoming a part of it, but to disrupt it. And so I think court watch is one way to really, it's an important way to get involved. There's many incredible, especially, you know, in Massachusetts, but in other places too, great court watch programs. And if you don't have one, that's something that should be developed.
Yeah, actually, Rada, to speak to that, is I think that was very instrumental in my release, because my ability to pack the courtroom kind of put an eye on not just the judge, but more so put an eye on the prosecutor, where I was convicted at 19 years old in 1993 of murder in the first degree, and the courtroom wasn't really packed with people who were non-biased and interested in what was going on. It was either my family or law enforcement. But part of what changed wasn't just the dynamic of the evidence, but part of what changed was that there was a multitude of people who are now in the courtroom wanting to bear witness to what was going on. Like, how did we get to this point? It's been 20-something years later, and now all of a sudden there's new evidence that's coming out. How did we get to this point? And I believe that compelled the prosecutor in the case to kind of tread lightly, be a little bit more careful in what they were trying to pull over on the court and my attorney, because now there was people that could bear witness to and speak to the injustice that was taking place. And so I just wanted to give some support to what you were saying.
Yeah, I also kind of want to jump in on this. When someone's asking what they can do to get involved, we have organizations all over the United States. Most states even have their own Innocence project. When you donate to one, it's not going to all, they all are separate. And so if you're in your own home state, look for your Innocence organization. If you don't have financial means to support it, you may have resources. If there's so much need, it takes a tremendous amount of resources to do this work, to free innocent people. And not just that, but after the math. After they've been released, the trauma that's been inflicted, not just on wrongfully convicted, but the original crime survivors in a lot of the cases. There's a tremendous amount of harm, and resources are needed for that as well. So I would contact your local organizations. You can contact the Innocence Network to find out where they are local to you, or you could just Google it and try to find what you can find, and then ask them, what can we do to be involved? And that is the best way to continue and support this work. And
so I don't know if you would like, Heidi, to just shout out the Innocent Project organization where you're from and there you're staying, but I definitely want to take the opportunity to let those who are in or from New England to know that the Innocent Project that is where locally here is the New England Innocent Project. And if you have the financial means to donate to that, please do. If you have some intellectual properties that you feel as though could benefit the organization, please donate that. Just whatever you can do to get involved with that organization. It can't be stated enough.
Yeah, and I can totally do that. So if you're from Washington State or the Pacific Northwest, there's the Washington Innocence Project, and that's where I'm from. Also Healing Justice, which is an organization helping with everyone harmed by a wrongful conviction. It's probably the most comprehensive for using a restorative justice method to help heal all of us, including original crime survivors, after it's all said and done. But the main thing is just getting in contact with them. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So Darryl, go ahead.
Yeah, Darryl.
And speak to that point, the Cooley Innocence Project is a great project. The University of Michigan, they have the Innocence Clinic where they also look at cases that just don't involve, because a lot of innocence projects are confined to just looking at DNA evidence, whereas the University of Michigan have an innocence clinic that's somewhat unique, and that they look at any evidence or any claim where there's a credible claim of innocence, and the Cooley Law School here in Michigan does the same. But I also wanted to speak to John's point about becoming educated, because education is so important, because education, you can make informed life choices. And so if you're gonna, most people that are involved with the criminal justice system, the reason why they're so intimidated by it is because they don't understand it, they have no knowledge of it. And so for those who are charged with a crime, this stuff ain't rocket science. And I can just tell you this, a lot of the lawyers that are involved with this, you know, they got some brilliant lawyers out there in the world, but then they have a segment of them that are predatory, that take advantage of poor families. And I, you know, in my company that I created, Legal Access Plus, I have mothers that call me and telling me, you know, this lawyer cheated me out of $15,000, this lawyer cheated me out of $20,000, he didn't do anything. And so I tell them, you have to educate yourself. And to that point, I wrote a book called What You Need to Know Before Hiring a Lawyer and What You Need to Know Before Filing an Appeal. I had 16 lawyers during my period of incarceration, so I know a thing or two about lawyers. And this book is very simple. It talks about, you know, contracts, and it's written in plain, simple language that the common person can understand. And I would recommend that people get this book, and I ain't trying to hustle you because I'm good, but you need to get this book. It will give you some tools, and it will teach you how to navigate the criminal justice system, the families, and the people who are incarcerated. It's written, again, it's written in plain, simple language. They don't have a bunch of legalese, and I would recommend that you get this book so that you can educate yourself on some of just the basic fundamentals of our criminal justice system. And that's why I wrote this book, for that purpose, because you have to be educated. You can't. So many people give up on their family members because they just think the system is just too tough. It is just too intimidating. They don't know what to do. They just wash their hands and they give up. You know, I spent 34 years in prison, lost my mother and father, almost all my whole entire family. But I was one of those ones where my family, they just didn't know what to do. So it was so painful for them to see me in jail that they rather not, they just blocked me out. And so it took me a lot of time and a lot of effort. And a lot of times it takes a team of people. For those people who are in prison, you got to keep writing people, you got to keep calling people, you got to keep bugging people. Don't accept no. Keep going, keep going, keep going. If your son or your mother or your father or your daughter in prison, keep calling people. Don't accept no. You got to keep going. Do not get discouraged. You got to be inspired. You got to dig deeper, reach higher, work harder, do whatever you got to do to save your family member's life. And sometimes it's hard, but you got to keep going.
I wanted to also say, just to kind of bring the conversation back to the goal of our conversation today, which is about Black Lives Matter, and going back to supporting these organizations. I know that I can speak for the Washington Innocence Project, and I know that the network is doing this also, but it's recognizing even within itself that more people of color need to be brought into positions of leadership within even our own organizations, including Washington Innocence Project and the network. The network has actually created a diversity, equity, and inclusion unit now. And so this is such an important time in the climate of our world to be having this conversation, and with the organizers recognizing throughout all of these projects and networks that this matters. We need to be uplifting the communities that have been oppressed for so long. And so I just wanted to point that out as well when you're supporting these organizations and looking to get involved, knowing that they, you know, that this ties into the conversation we're having today.
So,
just real quick, give credence to the many conviction integrity units that are popping up all over the United States. There are not many of them, but they're doing incredible work. And I think if prosecutors really believe in the integrity of their offices, then they will create conviction integrity units to look at what they're doing and what police are doing, because it was through the conviction integrity unit, the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit, Tim Worthy, Valerie Newman, two great human beings, and they're doing great work. They've released more people in the state of Michigan than probably any conviction integrity unit in the nation. And they're doing, and they just released a couple of guys yesterday. They do thorough work, go through the whole case, they investigate the whole case, they talk to the witness, and it may take some time. But when they make their recommendation, judges adopt their recommendations. So I would encourage prosecutors, and if legislators, demand that your prosecutor's office create conviction integrity units to review their work, because we know that there are systemic problems in our system. We know that there are people who are innocent that are being unlawfully convicted. And so this is the time. If there's no better time than now. If not now, when? The Black Lives Matter movement has brought national attention to these issues, and not just the Black Lives Matter movement, because there are many movements, there are many organizations that are working in tandem with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was here before the Black Lives Matter. It was doing great work. I would encourage you all, with your prosecutor's office, to create these type of units, because they are necessary to stem the problem that we are suffering right now with unlawful and wrongful convictions.
So, we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to say their last thing that they want to say. But I did want to, from my end, say that this is a discussion about how systemic the problem is. So you've heard from everybody about, from the police to the judges, to the prosecutors, to the lawyers, to the appeals, to not having people in the courtroom. I mean, we're not talking about simple fixes. We're talking about something that is much bigger than that. And what it requires is for us to question all of those things, for us to disrupt, for us to join together, for us to be in community, for us to be passionate. And, for those, and for people who, for this is not, something that they have a personal connection to, I would say join, but step back. And for those who have a personal experience and personal connection, and therefore a perspective that is so significant and essential, step up. And now I want to leave it to our panelists to give their any closing thoughts that they have.
I'll start, and I'll let, Shana close, because he's a good closer. He's brilliant. You all are. If you want to get involved, I would say don't be scared. This is the time, and I know the system can be difficult to deal with, but get involved. Educate yourself. Write letters, call people, don't be scared. Our divine purpose in life is to help one another. That's our divine purpose. That's what God put us here for. And I'm gonna just I did something good to help else. God has done something greater to help me. And this is why through my company, some people they can't even afford the little meager amount that I charge, and a lot of times I do it free because I can. And so we need to connect. For all the Innocence programs around the country, please unite, connect. We need to create a platform so we can talk, so we can communicate, so we can continue to come up with solutions. I don't want this just to be a one-time conversation. I want this to perpetuate and to go on and on and on. And I know all of you out there have brilliant ideas. All of us, the four of us, we don't have all the ideas. We don't have all the answers. But together, we can come up with the answer. And if we unite, and just let me say this here. If you want to come up with some solutions right now, y'all see what's being done. You see what our commander-in-chief is doing. Please, I don't care if you want to who you vote for, but I'm just saying, exercise your constitutional right, and vote. And for those individuals who want to get in contact with me, go to www.legalaccessplus.com, and just my website, and we'll give you all the information about me and buying my book. If you want to get in touch with me, please do. I invite you to do so. And I thank you all for taking this time to listen to me. God bless you.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yeah, for me, this was about hopefully starting and continuing a conversation amongst those in the wrongful conviction community. I do understand that there are people not within that community or new to that community who are listening as well. And so for me, of course, the color of my skin gives me an even more unique perspective. And I just want to encourage those that are white, like myself, to not be afraid to understand more about what our Black brothers and sisters are trying to tell us. There is no competition. There's no, we just need to understand the disproportionate amount that has happened to them based on just color of skin alone. And I think that will all make us better contributors to fixing the system as a whole. Dismantling it, actually, maybe blowing it up and just rebuilding it entirely. So
that's for the next conversation we're going to have about blowing it up. Thank you, Heidi. And Sean, you're our closer.
Yeah. First and foremost, I thank you all for your participation, for your attention, and very important matter. In closing, I would just want to touch on just briefly defunding the police. Defunding the police is really about reallocating resources, putting resources into the communities of Black and brown people, those whose community has been ravaged by the result of this criminal justice system. I would also caution us in terms of conviction integrity units. Although they do good work, they are still part of a system that is geared towards and hell-bent on brutalizing, whether it's psychological or not, Black, brown, and poor white people. So I would just caution around that. And then lastly, I would definitely echo the need to vote, the need to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And if you're standing on the sideline waiting for an entry point, you are by default becoming part of the problem. You have to just check in with your moral compass and just listen to your moral compass. Actual moral compass is what's happening right or is it wrong? And if your moral compass is telling you that it's wrong, you need no other entry point, right? Other than that check-in with yourself to get involved. And there's a multitude of ways to get involved. Some of the ways we spoke on, but just check in with somebody that is involved with in some way, shape, or form the correction of what's going on within the criminal legal system. And in closing, as I said, my name is Sean Ellis. If you want to get in touch with me, you can friend me on Facebook. You can also email me at skareeme7@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you and connecting with you and continuing to work. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome.